remember that our actions always affect other people.
Most studies point to us being lonelier than we've ever been.
You're asking me that?
I don't know if it gives us the kind of connection that we truly crave.
I want everyone to be happy and find love, but
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Melding Minds. I am your host, Clarence Abercrombie, and today I am joined with Hannah Kate Marshall. She has been a teacher for 17 years, and 10 of those being with autistic kids in the local Panhandle area of Florida. She's been a dancer for 25 years and has been teaching for the last 7. So, Hannah.
yes.
You have obviously been a Floridian for a very long time.
Yes, the very long time.
What keeps you in Florida?
The beach.
The beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
The
love
beaches
it.
here are gorgeous.
Yes.
Yes.
I love
Tell me about them.
Beautiful, perfectly white sand,
Mhm.
clear green water. It's just great. I like to be warm,
Yeah.
so
But the
love it.
humidity.
I know.
The humidity.
I do prefer a dry heat,
Okay.
but
But you'll take the beach
I'll
over
take
that.
the beach. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I've known you for a little while, obviously. Obviously, our audience is getting to know you right now, right? We met dancing.
We did.
How did you get into dancing?
My sister actually started dancing, swing dancing.
Mhm.
And because she's 7 years older than I am, my mom let me go with her, even though I was 12-year-old
Okay.
at the time. And I started swing dancing, really liked it. And then they would play a salsa here and there.
Mhm.
I was terrible at it, didn't know anything about it. But then when I was old enough to get in the club, I started going salsa dancing. And I just loved it and stuck with it ever since then. It's become an addiction.
But you started with swing.
I started with swing. Yeah.
So which one holds your heart currently? Does swing still hold like a special place? Do you still do it, or are you primarily like a salsera now?
Primarily, yes. But swing does have a special place in my heart, and I still do it occasionally.
Yeah.
My teaching partner on Wednesday nights is like the organizer for the swing scene in Pensacola. So
Okay.
we get to, am I not supposed to say Pensacola?
I mean, it's all about how much you want people to know, right?
Great. Well,
I
here's my
live
address.
at
No.
112. No.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's one of the main organizers for
Yeah.
the East Coast Lindy Hop swing scene. So we dance regularly.
When you're dancing with someone, you've already broken a lot of the barriers to romance.
Yeah.
Whether that's short term or long term, I think you've already broken a lot of the barriers. So we're already touching each other, right? We're already talking to each other. I may even have an opportunity, if I've practiced a bit, to show you a skill, an impressive skill. I may even have the opportunity to impress you. So I think that dancing accelerates some of the normal timeline, so people get to the fun bits a little bit quicker. And I think that because within the culture itself, you move from one partner to the next, to the next, to the next, that sometimes it's easy to move from one partner to the next, to the next, to the next in other ways, which if everyone's not on the same page can be really detrimental to relationships. I think that your point as an organizer, your perspective as an organizer of those kinds of events is something else to consider. And I used to do the same thing. But it's super, super hard to manage. And I don't know if it's something that you can actually avoid when it comes to people hooking up,
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's possible to find a long-term love in the dance community?
I do. Yeah.
What makes you say that?
Because for dancers, like dancers, people who
Yep.
this isn't not just a thing they do every now and then, it's an addiction. They're like,
Yeah.
ready for their next fix, like every other night, like those people who are out there for dancing and not out there for other reasons.
Yeah.
If you meet someone within the community who you have a connection with and you fall in love with them and you're both on the same page, I definitely think that can work because, for me going out there, it's just dancing. I'm not looking for a partner when I like a life partner or a romantic partner when I go dancing. Sure, we can be friends, if we have that kind of connection, but I'm not out there looking for that. I'm out there to dance and have fun, have that connection during that song on the dance floor, and then, we move to the next partner. But I think if you are both on the same page that, you want to keep dancing, just as dancing, and you want to have a committed relationship, I think you can find a long-term.
I think I agree that it's possible, but experience.
Is it possible is what you asked me. You didn't ask if it's likely.
Probable.
If there's like a high percentage of it working out. I didn't say that.
Yeah. I think I've seen it ruin a lot of relationships.
Yeah.
Like I've seen as an instructor as well, and I'm sure you've seen this, I've seen a lot of people come in with marriages and leave single.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
It's that like grass is always greener. I've got all these options in front of me now. It's not, it is a different culture. Like, I feel like there are other similar cultures, where you're meeting new people all the time.
So you mentioned that you think that people believe that the grass is always greener. I think we are seeing that a lot in other areas as well. It seems that maybe there's some false advertising going on in people's lives that have them believing that there is always something better out there. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
What do you think the answer is for that?
Well, for me, it all boils down to values or principles, virtues. And that's something that was like drilled into me as a child. And I feel like it's less and less of a topic of conversation now in general. And if you don't have values, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, that saying. But people who come in married and leave single, if it's because there are all these options in front of their face, then, that to me is a lack of values or focus on the things that you value. And if it's because of other problems, which it very well could be, then fine. But it is a common theme, I feel like, in the dance community that, people will come and see, oh, there's this attractive person and we dance so well together and we have this chemistry on the dance floor and maybe I would rather be with them than my current partner. Yeah.
So would you say, so I typically ask this question, and I don't know your answer, but it seems like it might be related. So what is a difficult conversation that we are not having as a community that we should be having? And where do you think that conversation should start?
Same answer. It's the values, because everything we do is affected by our values or lack of values. And again, with the, thinking of other people, that your actions never just affect you. I think we are living in a very selfish time right now, where people are focusing on self-improvement and inner growth and that sort of thing, which I definitely work on myself. But prioritizing yourself and valuing yourself does not mean not valuing other people or not thinking of other people or the way that others would be affected by your actions. And I think that conversation has to start at home. It has to start as a child. It shouldn't end there.
Yeah.
But that's the first place you're going to be exposed to values. And of course, everyone's values are going to be different, but there are some that I feel are pretty universal.
Yeah, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you say values, I'm trying to define that, because I think that it changes from person to person.
Sure.
But in the specific example that you referenced, it seems more like consideration, like acknowledging that other people are also having a life experience. Sometimes I fall in love with words. So I don't know if you know I write poetry, but I write poetry.
Yes. I'm a fan.
Oh, thank you. But so sometimes I fall in love with words, right? And there's this word called Sonder. And it's the sudden realization that other people around you are living a life that is equally complex, like as your own.
And very different.
Yeah. And I think that there are a surprising number of people who haven't felt that, who haven't realized it. I think, just to acknowledge this about myself, there was a very long time before I realized it as well. And I think it's even almost become popular for people to refer to other people as NPCs, where they're like, oh, it's like they're not like a real person. They're just existing, which I think undermines the uniqueness of every person. I think it also like paints the world in this kind of gray when it's so full of color, when you actually acknowledge that other people are experiencing things with you. But to another point, I think it also allows you to give people grace.
Yes.
Right? When you realize that, oh, it's not just this person being an asshole to me. This person, while an asshole, might also be going through a really tough time at home. And I found myself lately going, you know what? That person's not happy with something in their life, and just letting it go.
Yeah. Or if you're close to that person, asking them, are you okay? Rather than getting upset with them off the bat for the way they've treated you or something they've said or done.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like the majority of the time there's something else going on.
Yeah. So let's dive into values a little bit more. So I gave one value based on the example that you gave me. Are there other values that you're referring to as well?
Yeah. I would say values, principles, morals, virtues, just that whole genre. For me, there are some that are universal. Values are going to change from person to person, family to family, culture to culture, but respect, I feel like that's something that all human beings value and want. You know, like honesty. Maybe that's more important to some people than others, but I feel like across the board, that's something that most people in general, regardless of where you live, how you grew up, you want that. The consideration is huge.
You know, it's funny. So while you were talking through that, I'm trying to piece together kind of like what my personal feelings are on it as well, right? Like, so, and I've always kind of put the things into two baskets, right? I go, you got ethical and you got moral, right? I think the issue with morals is that they do change from person to person. When it's a question of ethics, though, I think it's a question of fairness, which is a little bit easier to dice out, right? Like if I'm doing something for you under fairly similar circumstances, then I should be willing to do it for this person as well. That is fair. It would be the ethical thing to do the same thing for them, right? When you get into morals, you really have to dig into where they come from. So it may be moral for some people to not shake with their left hand, right? Don't shake hands with your left hand. It's weird, to be honest, in the first place, but but in some cultures, that hand is used for specific things and it's disrespectful. In the States, though, it would just be a weird thing. You'd just be like
if your right hand was full, you would
100%, right? Like you'd just be like, oh, it's just my left hand. So I really have a tough time kind of nailing that down. And when you say respect, right, I go, yeah, but like that's the problem, right? Is there's a mutual friend we have. I won't say her name, but we just recently got back in touch. And one of the things that she taught me when I was hanging out with her was how to listen and kind of wait my turn to speak. So when we used to talk, because I grew up in a family where we used to overtalk and we were constantly competing for that airtime, I used to overtalk people when I had something to say. And I noticed that she shut down when that happened. And at one point she was like, hey, do you notice that you do this? And I was like, no, I didn't notice that I did that. And she was like, oh, okay. She didn't make a big deal about it or anything, but just made me aware of that. And some people would look at that as being disrespectful. But really, it's just kind of like my background was that was the only way you got to say anything is if you jumped in. So how do you navigate that?
I do think that respect is going to change from one person to the next, but I don't know. I feel like general respect for another human being is what I'm talking about.
Like, give me an example.
I don't know. Like, if someone falls and hurts themselves, not laughing, offering a hand to help them up, those types of respect, just more generalized, not specific things that may bug a specific person and not someone else.
Yeah, so those are character-based things, right? Like, so for me, I listen to that. So the example where you're like, hey, someone falls and trying to help them up rather than laughing at them, right? I go, that's a character thing, which I think lends itself to your previous point, right? It's a kind of value thing, and it kind of starts at home, right? So let's say you have a kid and they're bullying some kid at school, right? As a parent, how do you deal with that behavior to make sure you're not raising someone who thinks it's okay to take advantage of someone because they are weaker or because they're less economically stable or, whatever reason?
You're asking me that? I mean, I'm not a parent. I have.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
played that role in many children's lives, but
I think it's a rhetorical question, right? It's a question that, hey, if you decide to have kids, that you should be asking yourself.
You should be thinking about those things.
Yeah. And, to some extent, right? To some extent, I think that people think that having kids is like this cute thing to do, but they don't realize that, like, no, you have the responsibility of really forming the populace that's going to make up the next generation, and what do you want that to look like? And I think a lot of people make the decision lightly. To some extent, I have a son who I wish I got to see more. Me and his mom split, and I've always wanted to be a little more involved in his life. But my impression of the situation is that, and this is me trying to be as fair to her as possible, right? Is that she has raised my son largely on her own, and he is very reliant on her and the feelings that he gets from her, and I just don't do anything for him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't see a desire, at least currently, from him to want a relationship with me, and it breaks my heart. But part of the reason it breaks my heart is because I do look at that as a really heavy responsibility, and I wish I had more influence to help him form into a man that other people will look up to in the future, as being a guide for that morality and character.
2 points I want to touch on that you made. One is that, you feel like he doesn't have a desire to have a relationship with you. And I just want to say that coming from someone who did not meet their father until they were 21, that can change.
Yeah.
And my mom never spoke an unkind word about my dad to me, but my own personal feelings, I did not want to meet him after he left my mom. I was a baby, know, and I didn't remember him. And why would I want to meet him or have a relationship with him when I was older, when I never had before? But that changed, and I feel like we have a good relationship now. We're friends, we get along, and there's a lot of things about myself that I didn't realize that I got from him. And I probably asked my mom before, "Are you sure I'm not adopted?" Because I felt different from my mom and my sister, and in a lot of ways. And when I met my dad and my half siblings, I saw a lot of similarities that I didn't see.
Yeah, you're like, oh, it all makes sense.
Yeah, really. Yeah. So, just want to throw that out there for you. That very well could change.
I appreciate that, actually. I really do.
Good. And the other was that, it is a heavy responsibility. We're raising the next generation, and what do we want that to be like? Yeah. And I feel like that kind of, like, if we look at that, look at our parents, look at the parents of, the generation below us, I feel like some of our childhood trauma is like from things that our parents were doing that was considered normal or even progressive at that time. They were, as always, throughout every generation, they were learning and growing and changing, and they were doing what they thought was best, changing things from their childhood that maybe they didn't like or they did like, and trying to replicate that or make it different for their kids, and so on and so forth. And so I think a lot of like Gen X and millennials who are parents of the generations below us right now, we're changing things that our parents did. And like I said, all that, self-improvement and focusing on yourself and whatever, it's great. We all do need to do that, but it's like we have almost taken it a little bit too far with some of the younger generations, and they're now only thinking of themselves and not thinking of other people. And I don't want to make a blanket statement like that. And I don't want to say that they're not thinking of like society, because I do feel like in like scientific advancements and stuff, they're doing the thing.
Yeah.
But as far as interpersonal relationships, it's like it's all about me. That's where this like cancel culture and ghosting people and stuff, that was not a thing when I was younger.
Yeah.
And now it's like super common. And
I want to hone in on something that you said earlier that I think was a bar.
Thank you.
I want to tip my hat to you for not just shitting on Gen Z.
Yeah, no.
Because I do think they do a lot of things very well, right? So one of the things I think that they do very well is I think they're way more concerned about environmental things, technology things. I think they're way more aware in that regard. I also think they're more in touch with themselves, which is great. But I 100% agree that when you put that person in a circle of 25 other people, that they're not as good in that space as the previous generation. And I think a lot of it has to do with when we were in groups of 25 people growing up, that was our group. And we had to make that work. Whereas now you'll have that same group of people on their phones talking to
other people
who are not in that same space. And they don't look at each other as part of the same group at all. So, which leads me to this question. Is social media ruining us?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't really have an answer to that because there are great aspects, you know. It really allows us to keep in touch with people who we would not otherwise see. Case in point, you know, you're halfway across the world and we can easily keep in contact with each other, whether it's directly, you know, messaging each other or just, you know, viewing what we share on social media. It gives us access to different products or views on things that we wouldn't necessarily encounter otherwise, but it does lead to a lot of, you know, comparing yourself to other people and maybe leads to some mental health concerns for sure.
I mean, you know, most studies point to us being lonelier than we've ever been, right? So I look at it and I go, while it may give you the illusion of connection, I don't know if it gives us the kind of connection that we truly crave as humans. You know, not necessarily, oh, I'm connected to you, because you could argue that through the electronic means, the technological means, that we're connected, right? But sitting down and having a conversation like this, like, when have we done this? Right? I can count on one hand the number of times we've actually sat down and had a conversation, just talked
you
about
and
things. Yeah.
You can't count it on one hand. We're going on 2 decades of friendship, pal. You came to my house at like midnight. We had a dance party in the Walmart parking lot.
Yeah.
You know, we've had some legit conversations throughout the years.
I'm not saying that we haven't had some awesome times together. I think we have. But have we had conversations that have gotten to the core of like what we're thinking? I can count those on one hand.
Okay.
Like 100%. Have we been friends? Have we been hanging out? Are you someone I absolutely adore? Yes. But you know, and this isn't a dig on our friendship or anything, but I haven't even done it with my mom. Like my first interview was with my mom, and I had to do it with her, to be honest. There are lots of reasons why. I talk about it in the in that podcast, but sometimes we go through this life, and I think this gets back to the Sonder thing. I had lived my entire life looking at my mother as a resource, you know, because as a kid, that's exactly what she is. Mom, I'm
Yeah.
hungry. Mom, I need money for this thing at school. Mom, I need some advice. Mom, can you help me with my homework?
Yeah.
You know, so our parents are a resource for us growing up, and we totally disregard the uniqueness of their lives and the fact that they had one before we kind of came along.
Right.
Right. So, you know, when I thought about doing this whole thing, I referenced this too. I said I was kind of embarrassed that I had never taken the time to sit down and hear about my mom's life and ask questions about her beliefs and all of that. I would argue that prior to technology being like so prevalent in our lives, that would have happened earlier.
I totally agree with that. And to go back to our friendship, I would say what I was thinking is we've had deep conversations, meaningful conversations,
100%.
But conversations like this, where you're like asking questions about what's wrong with the world and society, it's not a common thing.
Yeah,
it should be, but it's not. But yeah, I believe that my mom's relationship with her parents was much closer, and you know, she knew a lot more about them than I know about her, for sure. And she even sat down with them towards the end of their lives and recorded conversations with them and wrote down stories that they had told so that she could remember those and pass those on. But you know, that is not something that I have done with my mom. I have not had a conversation like this with her. So
yeah, it's crazy. Like some of the things that came up in that conversation, I'm like, first of all, I'm like, too much information.
Don't tell me that, Mom.
Too much. Mom, please stop. And some of it was like, really, that's what you believe? Like, because I'd never had those conversations.
Yeah.
Like when you ask somebody, one of the reasons that I settled on that question, right? The question that I asked, and I make a point to ask it very clearly, is because when you ask somebody, hey, what is a difficult conversation that we should be having that we aren't? The heart of that question is, what are we not talking about that you really, really care about?
Mm-hmm.
And the next part of that being, where should that conversation start, allows you to lead us into that from the most comfortable place, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's funny, the answers have been completely different.
Yeah.
Like, at this point, I haven't posted any of these yet.
Yeah.
But like, every single person has brought up a different thing. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to some extent that most people would be saying the same thing until I started posting, right? Where people could kind of reference and go, oh no, this is, I can't do that one because someone's already done that.
Yeah.
But no, every single response has been different.
I like that. And I thought about that, you know, like, there are a lot of difficult conversations and important things, but I feel like a lot of those conversations are already being had. Mm-hmm. Maybe not as much as they should, or the conversation as a whole, you know, in society is not progressing as quickly as it should, but that those conversations are happening. And I chose something that was personal to me, for sure, because it's tough.
Yeah.
And people are not talking about.
I think that the topic you chose specifically kind of gets to the heart of a lot of things, though,
It
right?
does. Mm-hmm.
Like, so first of all, kudos to you.
Thank you. A+ student.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it gets to the heart of a lot of different things. Look at how many things we've talked about just from it, right? Yeah. We've talked about relationships and dancing. Mm-hmm. We've talked about bullying. We've talked about, all kinds of things from this one thing, which is values. So the question I have for you is, when you're talking about values specifically, right? Because I like to get a little more specific. We were talking about values specifically. We talked about children. We talked about okay, but we're here now, right? So we're dealing with adults, some of which have very different values from yourself, myself, other people. How do we exist together?
Balance. You got to find a balance.
Yeah.
You know, that may just be the key to all of it. Going back again to the, your actions always affect someone else besides you, whether or not you see the effect that it has on the other person, whether you see it immediately, whether you see it in 10 years, whether it's a good effect or a bad effect. Our behaviors and actions affect other people always. And when we're thinking only of ourselves and not of other people, it tends to be more detrimental in the long run. So we have to find that balance of, where can we land that I'm going to be okay with it and you're going to be okay with it. And I don't have an answer to that, but
it's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking of law, right? Doesn't law kind of attempt to get at solving this problem, meaning that there is a collection of rules that govern how you interact with society.
Yeah.
Right? So and I feel like this is all tied together, right?
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you go, not to dive into this topic specifically, but like you look at something like abortion, right? And you have some people on one side of the argument, some people on the other side of the argument. The question is, should it be law, right? Because as soon as you make it law, then essentially what you're saying is you're saying that we as a society have now agreed to make it this. And you will be held accountable for not behaving in accordance with the agreed upon contract to exist in this society.
Yeah.
So I think that to some extent, law aims to get after what you're talking about. I guess the issue is when you're looking at some of these other things like interpersonal behaviors, like how do you make a law for that, right?
Yeah.
Like you can say, hey, there's no hate speech, right? You can do that to some extent. You can punish bullying, right? But like at some point, is the law or the government just too inside of our lives? But then I guess the counter argument would be, it has to be because we're not doing what we should be doing.
Yeah. Taking it back to the salsa. You need the structure. I need that structure there.
Yeah.
With a little bit of freedom to do my own thing, but I need that structure. I think everyone needs
I think
structure.
I think that is a perfect place to end. But yeah, full circle.
Yeah.
Right? Is ultimately, maybe that's what we're all looking for, is a little bit of structure and a little bit of freedom mixed in there. Structure to feel safe and freedom to feel alive.
Absolutely.
Well, Hannah, thank you for joining me today. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.
You should keep that at the end. Clap.